Guyana in the Caribbean. Lush and mysterious rainforests, white and sunny island beaches, right? But how much do we really know about the history and culture of this region? Join us and together we'll go on a voyage of discovery. The cinemas of Guyana. I'm sure that many of you will agree with me when I say that growing up and living in Guyana in the 60s and 70s, and even into the early 80s, was blissful, peaceful, and much fun. A great part of this centered around going to the cinema. This was a major form of entertainment for people back then. Who among you can remember those days? And how many can recall the names of the popular cinemas in Guyana? Well, join me, and let's take a walk down memory lane to revisit those wonderful days. Hi there, and welcome once again to the Aaron Darcy Project. This is where we look back at the history and culture of Guyanese and Caribbean people, places, and events. I am your host, Andrew, and today we'll look back at the cinemas in Guyana. Like I said, going to the cinema was a really big deal back then, and we were entertained with a wide range of English, American, and Indian movies. From the days of childhood to the times when as teenagers we had our first dates, and then as adults, the cinema was an exciting part of our lives. Movies were shown at 1 o'clock and at 9 a.m. on Saturday, but only if that Saturday happened to be during Easter or Christmas holidays. 5 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. shows were strictly reserved for older children and adults. You could catch an Indian movie most days at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 5 or 8:30 p.m. at the Liberty, Empire, and Plaza cinemas in the city of Georgetown, but English films were hardly ever shown before 1 p.m. In Kitty, that part of Georgetown where I grew up, we had one cinema, the Hollywood at Thomas and Alexander Streets. We also had the Liberty, but that was considered to be in Newtown, not really Kitty. Pit, or the stall section, was closest to the screen and was the cheapest ticket in town, not only at Hollywood, but at every cinema in the country, and this is where most people went, that is, boys and men. House, like an upper deck, was more expensive. Girls, families, and adults would go there. Above that was balcony, which was expensive, but where you probably went out with your first girlfriend. Our heroes back then were Rory Calhoun, John Wayne, and Audie Murphy, who were the stars of American cowboy and war movies. We later worshipped heroes like Wang Yu, Chan Sing, and Bruce Lee when Chinese or karate films became the fashion. Who remembers Agent X-44? He was among the first Chinese movie heroes. We also enjoyed Indian movies with stars like Dharmendra, Amitabh Bachchan, and Rajesh Khanna. The Indian movies popularized Indian culture, music, and actors among Guyanese people of all races. I remember going to an 8:30 show at the Strand Cinema one night, where the two films were Iron Fist with Chan Sing and I'll Die for Mama with Amitabh Bachchan. Even though the Bachchan film was an Indian one, it got more of a response from the audience than the karate one. The Indian movie definitely had more action and the audience simply loved it. Going to the cinema was indeed a source of wonder for us. Cinemas in Georgetown, like the Liberty, Empire, and Plaza, showed mostly Indian movies, and the girls. Man, as teenagers, we would ride around especially near to Liberty at Garnett Street on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, just to ogle at all the beautiful girls that lined up to get into that cinema. But let's look back at some of the cinemas that we did have in Guyana. See if you remember any of them. History tells us that the first movie house in British Guiana was the Gaiety, which was built in the 1920s and used to be at the corner of Brickdam and Camp Street in Georgetown. This cinema was burnt to the ground a short time later in 1926. The Gaiety showed only silent movies back then, that is, films with no synchronized recorded sound and with no spoken dialogue. Think of Charlie Chaplin. In 1930, the London Cinema was established on Camp Street, opposite to Colgrain House. This cinema showed movies with sound. The London was renamed Plaza Cinema in 1951 and a widescreen was installed. Another cinema, the Metro, opened in the late 1930s on Middle Street, just around the corner from the plaza. The name was changed to the Empire Cinema and it later became popular for showing mostly Indian movies. However, the very first movie shown at this cinema was an American movie called The Prisoner of Zinda. Some people so enjoyed Indian movies that, at 10 a.m., they would watch one movie at the plaza, then rush over to watch a 1 p.m. movie at the Empire. Or vice versa. Metropole Cinema at Robb and Wellington Streets opened around 1937, and the first movie shown here was The Merry Widow. Sometime around 1950, one of the two main political parties in Guyana was launched at this venue. Chetty Juggin's Political Affairs Committee and Forbes Burnham's British Guiana Labour Party merged to form the PPP. This is an indelible part of the history of the Metropole cinema. Sadly, this cinema was destroyed by fire in 2004. The very popular Liberty Cinema used to be at the corner of Garnet Street and Vlissingen Road in Kitty. Liberty first opened as the Rialto Cinema, then became the Doreen Cinema in 1952. The Doreen was burned down during the political unrest of 1963 and was afterwards rebuilt and renamed Liberty Cinema. The Olympic, built around the late 1930s, was another movie house that was located on Lombard Street. This appears to be the same building that later became a popular whorehouse where many a young man learned the joys of women and the price to be paid for this. Allboystown, one of the more disreputable and dangerous sections of the city, had its own cinema, the Capitol. Also built in the 1930s, this cinema was later renamed Rio Cinema. More in the center of the city, the Astor Cinema, at Church and Waterloo Streets, was built and opened in 1940. This building, though no longer showing movies, was still standing in the late 2000s. Sadly, it was partly torn down and mostly vandalized in the 2020s. In 1978, the movie Saturday Night Fever ran for 3 consecutive months at the Astor as a single movie. Cinemas in Guyana usually showed 2 films at each show, but this film was so popular that it was shown by itself for at least 3 months to sell out crowds. It was then shown as the main feature when other movies were added that made the show into a double. The Globe Cinema, which stood on the northwestern corner of Church and Waterloo Streets, directly opposite to the Astor, was built in 1952. The first film shown here was David and Bathsheba. The very first cinemascope and stereophonic sound movie shown in Guyana, The Robe, opened right here at the Globe Cinema. The Hollywood Cinema at Thomas and Alexander Streets in Kitty was built in 1957. Strand, the cinema in Command, sometimes called Strand Deluxe, also opened in 1957. Its first movies were Sayonara and The 10 Commandments. The building is now used for religious meetings. These were cinemas in the city of Georgetown. In the next episode, we'll take a look at some of those in the countryside. Life back then was simple, but times changed. Television and many other forms of entertainment became available, and sadly, going to the cinema became a thing of the past. Don't you agree? We hope you found today's episode interesting. I know that each of you have your own memories of the cinema. Please do share them with us. Like I said, in the next episode, we'll revisit some of the cinemas that were outside of Georgetown. We really value your comments, and these help us to produce better material that we all can enjoy. So share, like, and comment on all that we offer. Thank you for spending some time with us on the Aaron Darcy Project, and please join us for the next episode. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Goodbye for now.